Good evening, and welcome to the Sound Off Show. My name is Linda Kirker. I host the program. As many of you know, if you watch regularly, which I hope you do, and I appreciate that, there's so much going on in this state and in this nation right now. It just boggles my mind. I think probably that all of those things that are happening, in addition to the COVID virus and all the ramifications of that, it's just hard to keep your head on straight sometimes. And all of the parents and trying to take care of their children at home when their schools are not open. And the children, there was a little snippet on TV today. A child was told that they were going to be able to go back to school, and the child just grabbed her mom and was sobbing that I'm going to see my friends. And you know what we're doing to our society these days is really troubling in so many ways. And we need to get back to the fundamentals of upon which this nation was founded. And that way we all American citizens have rights and freedoms and opportunities and responsibilities to boot. And that's what our children need to be taught, how fortunate they are to live in a country that was created by founders who loved this nation and initially created it for themselves and for the future. But they also knew without any doubt that if the people were not vigilant and involved in the country, that we would end up being pretty much where we are today. And I'm telling you, and I tell myself this every day, that we need to watch what's going on, speak out about what's going on, stand up for the things that are right, that will bring this country back to its greatness. That's my opener. That's all you get. Now I have the pleasure of introducing my guest for tonight. He's on the program for the first time, hopefully not the last. I hope he'll come back again. His name is John Klar. And John, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Linda.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you, and thank you for driving all the way here and for doing all that you do and for being who you are. An attorney, a farmer, a pastor, a husband. I don't know, you have children?
I think my wife might say I'm not a husband lately because I'm doing the other thing.
You're
but,
so
God bless her
busy.
she's been very supportive. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure she is, and she should be, and I'm sure she respects what you're doing. And so do any of us who know who you are and what you are doing. John, I know you have a lot that you can say and hopefully will say, but could we start off? You're the founder of a new, is it an organization?
Yes, it's a nonprofit. I formed it's actually a funny kind of animal, but it's a corporation. It's an LLC. It's an L3C under Vermont law. It's a low profit corporation, but I'm not drawing a salary. In fact, I'll tell you about it. It's called the Vermont Liberty Network. I wanted to surprise you on camera.
Oh.
So I brought you some bumper stickers are those. The Vermont Liberty Network, our motto is nothing sweeter than Vermont Liberty. And you can actually buy some maple syrup, 100% pure maple syrup from Vermont, called Vermont Liberty Maple Syrup.
No kidding.
And you can always tell the Vermont Liberty by the cow. I brought this for you. This is a Vermont Liberty. If you get your camera there, you can see it says nothing sweeter than Vermont Liberty, vermontliberty.net. Now, people can order these T-shirts. You don't have to. This is yours. So people can order these T-shirts. They're 100% cotton. They're made in America.
Fantastic.
There is about approximately $4 profit off each T-shirt, which goes into Vermont Liberty Network. Okay. I'm not taking a salary at all. We make a small profit off the syrup if we sell it. We're competitive price, but
sure.
I wasn't going to throw the.
Yes, you make maple syrup, right?
Well, this is my family does, yes, but not in quantities sufficient for this. So we're supporting a local farm, Silloway Farm in Randolph, are providing the syrup. So we're all legal And
that's God's liquid.
well, it is, but it's part of our culture. And so part of the VermontLiberty.net or Vermont Liberty Network is to bring people together along issues, as you've seen, but also to celebrate our culture. And our culture is under attack, and it's okay to take pride in those aspects of your culture which are worthy of taking pride in: independence, self-reliance, maple syrup with draft horses. I mean, there's nothing to be ashamed. Work ethic. There's nothing to be ashamed about for being a Vermonter. And that's not to say that we haven't, had episodes of troubles in our history. We've had episodes of racism. We've also had episodes of eugenics by progressives who came here and told us we're all stupid so they could sterilize us. So this looks a lot more like the eugenics movement right now, what we see on the far left here in Vermont. But anyway, so I digress. So Vermont Liberty Net is something I've actually been working on for some time, and having run for governor and not made any decision about the future. I didn't run for governor to become governor. I ran for governor to speak to Vermonters, to listen to Vermonters, and demonstrate that there are a lot of conversations that we have not had, particularly about race, the pensions, a lot of things. It's as if you just don't talk about them. And now we are. And so we've built on that momentum. And rather than let that goodwill and that communication and that hope and that exchange that we built just die, we've transferred it into VermontLiberty.net. And there are a lot of other people coming with me. And we will demonstrate to people that we're here to stay and have a conversation.
Well, I respect you and applaud you for what you are doing in many ways, John. The people need to know, well, first of all, the people who are representing us, in quotes, in Montpelier as well as in Washington, D.C., need to know that their obligation is to work on our behalf, not on the behalf of some well-to-do person who's, donating money. I'll give you this if you do this for me. No, they have a job to do under the Constitution, under the national laws and state laws. And when was the last time that one of our one congressman or our two senators who are in Washington, D.C., or one of our legislators in the Vermont legislature, when was the last time one of them came to you to get your opinion on something that they were discussing?
Well, actually, that's you didn't know what you were asking, but actually they
good.
Do. I'm honored to say that after having run, I was throughout my campaign learning a lot of things from people, and I took notes, and I even maintained connections. And I said, look, whether or not I win, we're going to come back to this, and we're going to educate people about this.
Good.
And so what I've been very excited about is, particularly over the last few months, because of a lot of the disruptions in our lives over COVID, the disruption of, as you mentioned, of our schools and our children, our businesses on so many levels. People have, sometimes I'll get 6 or 8 emails in a day, and people will say, well, what are we going to do about this? Somebody needs to do about this. So I've been trying to coordinate those people, and I say, yes, I understand, but I certainly can't do it all. But I have to say that I'm thankful some of our legislators have come to me and said, John, what do you think about this? Or did you see this bill? And so, that to me, that's what I wanted to do. I got involved because I wanted to contribute towards policy or ideas that would be helpful. And so that's why you said, thank you for what you're doing. I didn't go to law school to get to be rich. No. I grew up really quite deprived, okay? I didn't grow up with white privilege. I mean, that whole conversation.
No, me either.
And that's okay. And I wasn't raised to be whining about it either. That's maybe a Vermont thing.
Me too.
And I did better than a lot of other people. But I had the opportunity to go to law school, and that was something that I never thought I would even be able to achieve. And when I did, I felt very honored to be able to give back. And just like, some doctors, maybe they want to have the BMW, and maybe they're real believers in caring for health. And so for me to be able to use that education in a way that is fruitful or productive for my grandchildren is a priceless gift. And so that's what I feel actually a duty to do right now.
John, in addition to feeling there's a duty, I have this and I've shared this with a few people lately. I feel very strongly. I mean, I'm obviously quite a senior citizen, okay?
Are you fishing for compliments?
No,
Okay.
no, I don't do that. But my belief is that even when you're done with your career and you're in your retirement years, if you discover or believe that you have a purpose for your life, that your life is valuable and that you have a purpose where you can try to make a difference somehow, that is the greatest gift that you can not only give to yourself, but you can give to your state or your neighbors or the Girl Scouts or your political party, whatever.
Well, could I differ with you a little there?
Be my guest.
I am your guest. I'm going to sound off with Linda Kirker. I'm going to take it a little step further because, what you're really talking about is kind of philosophical there.
Yes.
And you hit upon it earlier when you were talking about young people and how we get people to be more involved. And the reason people would be more involved is if they felt purpose.
Yes.
And I think that, in people's defense today, and I can certainly say this as now getting to be old myself, that when I got out of law school, when I graduated law school, there were still general practitioners around. They called them dinosaurs, all right? Because it was already by the mid-'80s becoming extremely difficult for a lawyer to run a business as a general practice where they could be a jack of all trades. It was already becoming extraordinarily complex. Now, how then, 35 years later, can American citizens expect to be up and abreast of all of these laws and developments, the technological advances, the complexities of things, and then we have a legislature that's bringing in 1,300 or 1,400 new bills a year? And that, by the way, is reflective of another whole ideological or social change. But what I want to get at is you talk about retirement. And so what happened to me was at 34, when my law practice was thriving in Connecticut, I got really, really sick.
You got sick?
Sick with Lyme disease, but I didn't know it.
I
was
read
bit
that.
with ticks all the time, but no, it crippled me. And I was a person who was extraordinarily healthy. I hadn't even been to a doctor in 12 years or more for a physical or anything, maybe stitches. But even that, if I could duct tape it, I would. I was really that kind of very healthy person, and I lost everything. So for me, I actually retired at 34. And so I started living life like that. And so I said, well, that's it then. I'm going to live in Vermont because my whole life I just want to live in Vermont where my family were and where I was. But everybody, my whole family said, if you ever want to make a living, get out of Vermont. Okay, this is what you laugh, but this is true. My grandmother said this to her kids when they were still in grade school, and they all pretty much got out of Vermont. And then when I got sick, I was like, you know what? I'm sick of working just where the money is. I want to be where the future is. That changed my life. And that's one of the reasons I'm actuated to do what I'm doing now, because everything I thought was valuable, and the real estate, and I own my own business, my own building. Okay. I had built a business and I lost it all overnight.
Wow.
And it makes you appreciate that the things that do not glitter are the real gold, if you might, to twist on a phrase. So I just would say you're absolutely right, and you are living it, and I respect you for it, and I wish more people would, because that sense, and by the way, that's very much a Judaic tradition, is in fact, if you have abilities and you don't give back to society, then you're committing a sin. So how many other people do we have out there? We have many people coming forward with this who have all kinds of different skill sets that they're bringing together. And I'm really excited to see it, because that is the community that used to keep us together before we abdicated it to government to run everything.
Well, I tend to believe that there are a lot of people out there in the audience and beyond in this state, excuse me, who maybe just haven't figured out, what they could be doing to be of service if they're retired and they're capable, whether they join a church and get involved or whether they, try to help with Girl Scouting or Boy Scouting or, just get involved in your political events, whatever it might be, help the Martha's Kitchen where, they provide food for people in need. There are so many ways to make a difference and at the same time to feel good about yourself.
Well, in fact, having purpose is what we all really want.
Of course.
And I think that's part of what's going on in
Now,
our
John,
culture wars.
yes. I wanted to ask you about, because you are a farmer, I know you have goats and you have cattle.
Sheep, no more
Sheep,
goats.
I'm sorry. To me, a sheep, a goat.
Sheep on the left, goats are on the right.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, go ahead. We've had goats.
Okay.
Sheep stay in the fence.
Oh, okay. And the
Goats.
goats wander?
Yeah, you know, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, not for goats. If the grass is greener inside the fence, they will jump out of the fence to get under the hard scrabble rock.
I love that you have a sense of humor. That's important.
Farmers need it. So,
Yes,
and we all need it. We all need it these days.
Especially in today's world. But I wanted to ask you, I have so many things here I want to talk about with you, and the time's going to fly by. I'll have to have you back. But
We can do 2 hours tonight. I'll bring more T-shirts.
okay, I'll pass the word around. What about farming? The future of farming in Vermont. I believe that it is so critical. It's natural. It's important to our sustenance. It's job producing. I mean, there are just so many positive things about farming. I hardly know what you know about farming, but what do you see as the future of farming in Vermont?
Well, you've given some of the answer right there. It really is about so many things, and I'm so excited actually about the question. You might not be able to tell yet how excited I am, because farming isn't just something for stupid hicks in dungarees. Farming, in fact, I was just reading a thing about it today. It's something like a $7 trillion a year industry. It is a massive industry, and it's estimated that we're probably incurring another $4 trillion worth of healthcare costs because of poor food supply globally. And again, we have to be careful with these statistics. But let's talk about the big picture, because you did. Farming has multiple dimensions of importance for Vermonters, much more than some might think. It's not merely economics. It's certainly not merely milking cows. We've lost our farms. But with the loss of the farms, we lose community, we lose the ancillary businesses, and that's why a central part of my campaign was what I called jokingly, but literally, the farming manifesto. It was laying it down as the law, but as a capitalist law, I suppose, a distributist law, which, you mentioned the founders and Thomas Jefferson, who were farmers and firmly believed that democracy or our republic would not function without an informed populace. How can people democratically govern themselves if they don't even know what the bills are? And so farming was very much part of that foundation. But look at Vermont. Remember, I mentioned this is not just about the Constitution and that foundation of our constitutional heritage. It's about our cultural heritage. And where is Vermont without its farms? And why do we have to abandon our farms? And where do people think we're going to be? The IBM Center? It's not an easy place to get to. I learned on the campaign trail that it's easier to ship goods from Burlington down south to Point South than it is from Rutland, because it's so difficult to get overland. Well, that's a reality. And we can still ship cheeses. We could do a lot to help our farmers. But there are so many other dimensions. One of them that I'm increasingly talking about is food security. Now, we see in our new lexicon that food security means making sure everybody has food. And I'm not using it that way. That's a type of food security that says that we need to give everybody an industrialized little can of Spam just for themselves so they can crack their Spam open and not have food insecurity. Food quality and food security means having local food, local farms, and not be getting your food from 3,500 miles away in the San Joaquin Valley or from China or from Brazil. We do so at our peril.
Self-sufficiency.
Self-sufficiency, but also locavore. Food. So this has to do then, and we'll get to some. This has to do with economics. Vermont for 200 years has made money farming. We can talk about how it's declined in dairy. Other areas continue to grow. It's declined in numbers horribly, and under COVID we lost almost another 100 farms. I just learned.
Did we really?
And the price of milk right now is horrid. Okay, and everybody, as Wendell Berry wrote years ago, in America, we lament the loss of our family farms, but somehow that doesn't seem to do anything to keep us from losing them. Why is that? Do we want to just talk the talk, or are we going to walk the walk? And there's huge subsidization by governments around the world of large farms and almost none of small farms. But what I really want to move into more for Vermonters, and particularly Vermont conservatives, to understand is that regenerative agriculture, organic local farming, will have multiple positives for us as a party and as a people. And it's no secret. Do liberals own the environment? Does the left own the issue? Well, they seem to own solar panels and they seem to own EV cars. And I say, let them own those, because regenerative farming will do far more for the environment and the ecosystem while supporting our culture, while supporting our businesses, while supporting local fresh food for our citizens and our children in schools and in hospitals and in prisons. It's a win-win, win-win, win-win. And if conservatives ever want to get their acts together and be involved in an environmental movement, then it's not about carbon. It's about fossil fuels and trucking your food from billions of miles away. It's almost like going to St. Albans to get a candy bar. It's a long way away from everywhere, this place, St. Albans. Every time I come, I love it because my family are from the area, as you might know.
You mentioned that. You still have family here or no?
I do. I'm not connected with them well, but yes, in Sheldon Falls was where my father's mother's family are from.
Oh, okay.
They're Hemingways. And actually, so the funny story of St. Albans itself, so they were from Sheldon Falls, I think is it. And they were dairy farmers. Like all of my ancestors, in Vermont, they're all poor. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's nothing to be ashamed of, I guess, or proud of. But that was the fact of it. But her mother was very significantly Abenaki, and I met her when I was quite young. And her mother, who has about 12 aliases for names, if you look her up, apparently ran a house of ill repute in St. Albans. And
share that.
And one of her daughters, but that's the poverty. I mean, she was Abenaki, and one of her daughters also, I think, sold a lot of liquor in St. Albans during the Great Depression. These were hard times. And we're in a time when people are rewriting our history completely. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be really nice to educate people about the true history of Vermont. And it includes a lot of horrors, a lot of poverty.
Oh, yeah.
It's not all about white supremacy and white privilege. In fact, those would be pretty bizarre concepts in those times because people were suffering horribly for decades.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, there are always ups and downs in life, peaks and valleys. And what we're made of determines how we come through it.
Well, and so some of the finest people I've ever met in character were people who survived the Great Depression. And so I think we've pampered generations now. And so I have a joke as a farmer that, you raise your children in hardship so they spend the rest of their lives being grateful instead of raising them pampered so they spend the rest of their lives on antidepressants because now they have to go to work.
Or expecting somebody else to provide for them.
And without getting into those broader issues, but we start here with farming and I finish with farming. The fact that Vermonters have struggled and suffered economically for decades in farming does not mean that there won't be a really, really wealth-generating future. Maybe you're never going to get billionaire rich farming. Good, you shouldn't. Because the real attributes, I can tell you this, I didn't know it. I got sick. That's why I got into farming. I wanted to do something because I had to do something for birth. That was the best thing I could ever have done for my children. Raise your kids around a farm, and it's priceless. You will save money in college fees and everything else.
Yeah, you teach them work ethic as well.
And gratitude.
Yes.
And humility and appreciation for things without a paycheck on it. And not everything is about, entertainment and consumption. In fact, one of the things that I think I'm maybe writing an article about this, one of the things I put my daughter through, our daughter through, was we had to put a uterus back in a sheep and it kept falling out. And she was like 12 years old and she was like, well, but I have to study. And I said, well, you could study after you help us get this uterus back in the sheep. And you'd think it traumatized her. It didn't. And now she drives ambulance, and she's an EMT, and she works 100-hour weeks. But this is what we meet from the people from the Great Depression. Life is not measured in dollars alone. And this is perhaps the big deception. Is our purpose to collect money? No, it isn't. And so even those who achieve wealth, they can be sometimes some of those miserable people in the world. But if we get back to that farming, what I want to say is just because we have 100 years of experience of poverty in farming does not mean that there's not money and profits to be made in farming. Ask Monsanto. Oh, yeah. Ask Cargill. Ask the big corporations. There's huge money. And now, because of COVID spending, we're going to face a period of inflation. And food inflation is going to destroy people on fixed incomes. Vermonters have a great opportunity to capitalize on that culture and that heritage and farmland instead of converting it all to subdivisions or affordable housing at $300,000 billion per square inch. And so we need to get government out of the way and let farmers do what farmers do, because that lifts all boats. And it's not just service sector. We produce goods for export. That's how you grow our state economy.
I want to see a resurgence of farming, profitable, productive, meaningful farming in Vermont.
Well, it is happening. But I think it's under the radar for a lot of people, and there are niche markets that are doing better. But the state could do a lot more to help with distribution and marketing and networking to help, to nurture those farms. But the market is there, and it is growing.
One of the things that concerns me is that there is such a push in Vermont and elsewhere to have. I can see that some of these folks would like to have farmland covered with solar panels. Excuse me, I hope that never happens.
Someone actually told me recently that she was a farmer too. And I said, really, what do you farm? And she said, solar panels.
Oh my gosh. Well,
she redeemed herself. She told me she had cows too that they fed under the solar panels. But I initially.
Do you want to depend on the wind and the sun for your power? I don't.
Well, if I could address this, because I have in my articles, and
then I have another.
Right, but just very quickly, people need to look critically at what's going on. And I've studied Wendell Berry for years, but he's been writing for 5 decades. Okay, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Look at the costs of producing solar panels. Look at the costs in the carbon dioxide produced in the coal-fired plants that are used to create solar panels in China and EV cars in Japan. And then look at the shipping costs to get it here. And then, really, if you really want to look at the costs, look at the pollution costs, not just the CO2. And that's the big boondoggle. What we really need to look at is we shouldn't have any disagreement that pollution is bad. It causes all kinds of problems, and we should all be on one page on that. The renewable energy boondoggle in Vermont says, look, we're going to use electric panels and we're going to use electric cars, and then we're going to have a net reduction in our CO2. But in a mathematically exquisitely stupid or deliberate sleight of hand, they exclude the component costs of producing the EV cars and the electric panels and their shipping here in planes and jets many times with no pollution control devices, or where they get disposed of, or where you're going to have batteries for them, or the fact that rooftop applications of solar panels in Vermont are the most expensive, the most inefficient. We're the 6th worst state in the country for sun, and that's why they don't have solar panels in Arizona and other states that have sun, because they're not taking money from poor people like they are in Vermont to subsidize those who can afford solar panels. And that's what they're doing. It's net metering. It's a fraud.
Someone told me today that they know someone who put solar panels on their roof, and underneath the solar panels, the roof rotted.
Well, that's an individual case, and there are plenty that are not.
It may not happen.
But I will say that the average cost is something like $220 per kilo. I mean, you can do the studies. The most expensive form of solar is a rooftop application as opposed to one of those fields. Now, why have we taken the most inefficient methods of generating electricity and imposed them on the entire state of Vermont? And now the the renewable energy companies are suing because the Department of Public Utilities dropped the net metering rate by 1 penny this year. This is something like $60 million a year being taken from Vermont ratepayers and without really their knowledge and being used to subsidize other people. And it comes from the people that are the poorest, the people on fixed incomes. They knew this. They originally proposed this under the Essex plan, and they were going to give an electric subsidy back to people. And then they realized it was unpopular because it kind of said, right, their big elephant in the living room, right, stick around their forehead. This is regressive. This takes money from poor people, but we'll give it back. And they're trying to do it now by taxing groceries, and then they're going to give them a check back.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and services.
Absolutely. It's kind of like if I could run a business and then all my customers, I got to make them do everything I wanted. Yeah. Hey, you know what? You got to buy 20 more T-shirts today. There, I signed it. And they just went up in price again. I showed in the campaign, and I showed the numbers, and I've shown in my articles, because I have a background in tax and finance, that year after year after year after year before COVID, the state employees and the state government increased year after year at a rate above the cost of living or inflation, while many Vermonters' incomes, on average, our median incomes did not in many of those years. So no matter what your incomes do, theirs go up. And that's why we have almost twice as many public servants per capita as neighboring New Hampshire. We can't afford it.
Is it 8,000? Government in Vermont? I'm not certain.
So, and I wrote about this, and I think I talked about it in the Farming Manifesto, but I believe it was, according to Burlington Free Press, at one point over 53,000 state and local employees.
Okay. All right.
But regardless of that, so here we have COVID. We've got all this federal money coming in. Has the state of Vermont cut its budget? No, they're expanding their budget. Have they funded the pensions? No. They're kicking that can down the road so they can spend more money on more projects, and they have more bills than they can count. Well, and we can't afford it anymore.
Another problem that really annoys the living daylights out of me, and that is that we, the taxpayers, who are already struggling, many people are during these times, are being forced to subsidize electric vehicles, weatherization of properties. That's my understanding. If you don't agree with that, you say so, of course.
Well, we're still in the middle of the session, and so we don't know what's actually going to be put through and with what amounts. There's still some tinkering, but both of those bills are...
But already...
They're there.
Yes,
I don't know that they've passed.
Depending upon your income level, you get so many $1,000, $2,000 or $4,000 or whatever, toward the purchase of an electric vehicle. If you want an electric vehicle, go the heck and buy it. But don't expect that my neighbors and I and my children are going to subsidize your purchase when we have other things that we need to spend our money on.
Well, and I would agree, but and yet disagree a little bit. Only just to clarify. I am. Thank you. I'm going to sound off again. You know, we can agree to transfer money as a society to specialized areas. We do it all the time, you know, and we transfer money when we build a road. But we tend to disfavor things that are regressive. And so that everyone knows what I mean, progressive taxes are more equitable because they progress or increase as people's incomes progress. Regressive taxes are taxes that disproportionately impact poor people, and they're a bad thing. And so whether or not EV cars are a good thing, a regressive tax to accomplish them becomes a bad thing. Do you see what I'm saying? But one more point I'd like to make is this. Let's say that EV cars were the greatest thing. And let's say that all of these plans were the greatest thing. And let's say that it wasn't even regressive and it was being done fairly.
Standard?
I'm saying that you and I agree they're the greatest thing. Okay, this is a hypothetical. So by your standard, you agree that they're great. Let's just say they are. Then you get hit with COVID. You get hit with a disease that wipes out 25% of your businesses, or else maybe your mishandling of the disease wiped out 25% of your businesses. And now all of a sudden you're the legislature. Even if it was a good idea, the rest of us, we might want to build a swimming pool, but when we lose our job, we have to hold off on the swimming pool purchase. Even though it might be a great idea, or maybe it's a sauna and I need it for my fibromyalgia syndrome. What I'm saying is the dogged determination with which this legislature has pushed these ideological agendas forward demonstrates they can't do math. It's actually part of the ideology. They don't believe in math because they don't want math to restrict them from saving the world. And the problem with math is that it doesn't care. And the problem with inflation and printing too much money and issuing $8 trillion worth of new debt in a short period of time is that it's going to give you a little bump in the reality world, just like those who lived through the Great Depression came to understand.
But, John, okay, So let's say a good project or idea comes along, and you think it's a great idea, okay? Like electric vehicles. Some people think that's the be-all and the end-all, okay? But maybe the majority of the people couldn't care less. But at the same time, because we are being forced to subsidize them with our tax dollars that could be put into something that we really appreciate and would like our money to go toward, it just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense.
So your question is, so what if I did have a good idea? Would I impose it on people? So I'm not sure.
It's being imposed. That is the point.
Well, I think there is, and so part of what I've been upset about and writing about a lot, and so I'm hoping that people will get educated with me, because that's why I write. I have the skill set. I go do the digging. I say to people, I read the book so you don't have to. I can summarize a book for you in a few sentences. You can get the gist of it. I can summarize the numbers for you. And so what I see over and over again is people with big ideas, and they don't have any plans on how to fund it. The recent bill, they want to fund all daycare for everybody under a certain income level. They admit they have no idea how they're going to pay for it, and they don't even know how much it's going to cost. You can't run your household this way. You can't run government this way. This is unprecedented. And now they want $10 million for a bank run by black people to give money to black people to buy land. And you didn't see this, H-273. No. And in fact, that bill, so here's another example of total disconnect from reality. This bill, H-273, pretty clearly written by somebody who moved to Vermont about a week ago, says that, no, really, I know who wrote it, but the Office of Legislative Counsel won't let me see any of the correspondence because it's all attorney-client privilege. No, we don't get to see what our legislators are doing. They have attorneys, 18 of them at the Office of Legislative Counsel, who get about $120,000 or more a year that we pay for, but we don't have attorneys. We don't have an attorney general that advocates for us. We have an attorney general in the Office of Legislative Counsel that work with special interest groups. Whether or not they pay money, they have an ideology, which, is sweeping through all of this. And so in this bill, it mandates, they want to set aside $10 million in grant money so that a black family can live in every town in the state of Vermont. And apparently they don't realize we have many towns in Vermont that don't have any people living in them. So you're going to spend money to put a family in Lewis, Vermont, where no one has lived since 1908, and they're going to die in their first winter. So what are you trying to do to people? This is total disconnect because somebody sat down and decided to create a utopian fantasy and then present it to our legislature so that they could all rubber stamp it without reading it or having any common sense or looking at the math. This is a pattern of a lack of accountability and a lack of accounting for math. The rest of us got to pay it. Our tax bills shouldn't go up anymore. Our property taxes are too high. And I would have thought after 200 years that my family owned our land. But it's like another mortgage that just goes up and up and up. And we can't, that's why people are moving into tiny houses and living in Walmart parking lots.
It's divisive. Your skin color, welcome. I don't care what your skin color is. Welcome. Be a contributor. Be an important part of the community. Raise your children well. Welcome aboard.
Let me give you a context for this too. Sorry to cut you off there, but you mentioned farming. Let's talk about farming and race. The number of farmers in America is now down to less than 1%. Most of them are rather large farms. There are many young people that want to move into farming. There is growth in the locavore and other local food movements. There will be. Oh, there is. There is thousands. You don't hear about it. And it is difficult because of entrenched forces that don't really want competition. And I talk about this, and it is complex. And they don't want me to grow my meat and compete with their McDonald's hamburgers from downer cows pumped full of all kinds of stuff. And it's actually illegal for me to speak against their meat, so I will. Well, I like to know where my food comes from. The more I've learned about my food supply, the more I want to know where it comes from. And if you don't know where your food comes from and you're getting burgers with body parts of over 1,000 cows in them, and you think that's okay for your children, and you can go munch in and watch TV and not get educated, you will pay the price. But you will pay the price whether you're black or white. Black and white people should be coming together to improve the food supply, food security, food health for all of us, especially in the urban areas where people are totally disconnected from where their food comes from at their peril. And who benefits if black and white people argue and dither instead of come together on the things like regenerative food? Well, large corporate interests. It can be liberal or whoever owns. But who benefits from this watch the birdie distraction over race? Now, you can apply that along down the line. Who benefits while we dither and don't do anything about the environment, arguing over carbon dioxide? When we all agreed we were polluting it, before Al Gore, we all agreed we were polluting it. It was actually Reagan and the Republicans who led us to form the EPA, and Rachel Carson and Silent Spring in the 60s warning us about, and we were like, well, good. We don't really want to kill ourselves with DDT and chemicals, right? And we create thousands of new chemicals a year that we put into our environment and our bodies, and then we're arguing over carbon dioxide. We should all be trying to reduce the amount of consumption we have. And the other thing is, who is my brother's keeper? As Wendell Berry writes, all of us participate in polluting in some way. And so when you have elitists who are going to decide who gets to use what, and I can't drive my beat up old car anymore because it has a little rust spot, but they're going to go buy a season's pass to go skiing and pump water into machines to create snow. And I think that in skiing, there's a lot of stuff that's not good for the environment. And it can't be justified in the sense that it doesn't produce any food, does it? Now, how dare we say anything against skiing? But if you lose skiing, you'd still have Vermont if you had your farmers. The farms, again, they provide the scenery. They provide everything about our culture. That's why people come here, and they don't want it to be a new LA. We don't want it to homogenize our culture with the rest of the country.
I will say, though, that one of the, at least previously, one of the larger income sources for the state of Vermont was tourism.
It still is.
Yes.
But it depends on agriculture.
Well, agriculture, as well as things like skiing that bring people here. Right.
Well, and that's why I'm not actually speaking against skiing, but I'm saying if you want to introduce a conversation about where we should be expending fossil fuels or our energy, then maybe we don't start with people driving to work. Maybe we start with people driving to leisure activities. Maybe leaf peeping should be banned. You know, we're going to time vehicles for idling for 5 minutes. Maybe leaf peepers shouldn't be allowed to drive around, because if you're going to have a moral conversation about the environment, then it's very hard to equate fossil fuels or pollution used for a leisure activity like leaf peeping with that used in a tractor or to grow a cow and complain about cow farts. Do people know where their food comes from?
Yeah. What I see today is government control of way too many aspects of life, from healthcare for all right? Whatever happened to private enterprise? And why do we need to have, I got several things that tie in here. Why do we have to have a minimum wage? Why does the government have to tell a private business how much they have to pay their workers? That used to be between the employer and the employee.
Well, I think, you've hit on a couple things, but first and foremost, a lot of these, if not all of these things we're talking about are well-intentioned, I suppose, but they're not well thought out. But here's the point. I don't have to impugn a bad motive to people to say that raising the minimum wage, even if well-intentioned, will do the opposite of what desired. And Milton Friedman explains this in his book, Money Mischief. Which is a great book because it talks about the temptations to print money, to not be responsible while you make money. He talks about this in there. But what he says is if you raise the minimum wage, then you cause inflation. Americans, Vermonters, you need to understand money supply and inflation, because once it starts, it's a vicious cycle and you can't stop it. The Fed can't stop it. And we're running off the rails with this. Now, the deeper question, because you actually asked a question that was a little harder for me to answer, why do we have to do this? Let's step back to something that we can look at blatantly. government, when it gets involved in in economics, eventually this is called fascism. Either, when government controls the economy, or when the economy controls, by some definitions of fascism, it is when industry and government are twined. A military-industrial concept, it doesn't really matter who's running who. But let's just ask this question. Let me ask a question before your question. Why are we right now, particularly in Vermont, passing law after law after law that are patently, blatantly, openly not constitutional? Did we want to have a discussion? You say, well, why are we doing this? How are we doing it? How is Governor Scott issuing edicts that violate the 14th Amendment, violate the Due Process Clause, violate the Free Speech Clause, trying to violate Free Speech Clause in the name of race? How can you distribute benefits under COVID or other things based solely on race when the United States Supreme Court in Bakke versus Regents of California has said that's not constitutional? They are blatantly avoiding the Constitution, just violating it openly, and we're not enforcing it. My whole dispute with the Montpelier City Council, when I very much in good faith tried to put forward a message that would have been in the middle of the road between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. See, some people wanted to go
talking about the flag?
The flag, when I put out the message, liberty and justice for all. At the request of other people, I'm just a patsy. I'm willing to be a servant. And then we went back in again with 20 more people, and they did not want to hear anybody differ with an ideological message. Now, that's not free speech, and it's not constitutional. And then they hid behind something called government speech. I mean, next thing, government can put a swastika out in front of the State House, and it's okay because it's government speech. Poppycock. This is pants down to the ground violation of the Constitution by the city of Montpelier. So I actually had to shut off the Zoom call that night because I was giggling, because I was like, I can't believe that they're this stupid, that the leaders, that the city council and the mayor of Montpelier know so little about basic constitutional law and the foundations of the First Amendment and how primary it is, the important to our whole culture, that they urinated all over it on the record. Okay. And they're going to pay in court. We're going to file that. That's why I'm doing a fundraiser right now. But how do they do that? And how do Vermonters tolerate that? Are we mice or are we men? Man. Are we going to live free, or are we going to die? Oh, well, we're going to be sexist if we say that. You know what I mean, Steinbeck. Are we going to be humans with purpose, whether retired or not? Are we going to stand up and live for something more than our bank account or what our neighbors think of us, or because somebody's, scorning us because we're not being socially compliant with a mask mandate? And by the way, how can you divide people between those vaccinated and not when people who are vaccinated apparently still carry the disease? I'm willing to be, I'm willing to be educated like anybody else about the science, but that's what we're told. And now the governor and others are saying that non-vaccinated people can't be in other.
You can't travel.
I will totally violate that all day long, right in your face, Governor, so you can sue me for it, so I can show you. I mean, it's laughable, just so all Vermonters know, it's become laughable, okay? It's become totally the rule of lawlessness. Okay, the rule of emperors with no clothes running around naked telling us what to do, and we can just start to laugh and snicker and ignore them because they're way off the reservation. They can't even enforce such things.
I know.
And this makes all of us lose respect for government.
They can if nobody stands up.
And that's not, people are standing up.
More and more. I see more and more people.
Thank God.
Thank God. I wanted to bring up where it is, Proposition 9, that is proposed Vermont constitutional amendment regarding all natural resources belonging to the state. What? I called up a legislator and I said, just exactly what does this mean? Does that include my well that I had to pay $5,000 years ago to have it drilled? Does that belong to the state?
I'm sure they couldn't answer.
Oh, water runs.
Riparian rights. So again, we have a long history of this stuff. And again, it comes into the question of the role of government and what the Constitution is there for. And actually, what I'd really like to throw out here in response, I'll throw out two things. First of all, as a lawyer, I will tell you that we're in uncharted territory. We've got the government basically in a kind of is kind of seizing the assets retroactively and becoming, instead of the public holder of lands for our benefit, it's more and more sort of a Martha's Vineyard gentrification that's going on.
Taking.
And well, yeah, if you look at the TCI, the Transportation Climate Initiative, it specifically says, if you read it in there, in lobbyists paid to produce this stuff by the Rockefeller Foundation, that we need to move people out of the country and into the cities so that they won't be spending so much fuel driving back and forth. So we'll compel them to do that, even if it destroys their culture, their dependency on the land, and goes against all common sense.
And
But,
they don't want one piece of land with one home on it. Okay, they want a bunch of homes on it.
Well, so again, and so that's, and that's a discussion we can have as far as what policy is, but don't put lipstick on a pig and tell me that this doesn't smell, because just be honest with us about what you're doing. But what I was going to get at is this. Wendell Berry has written about this very extensively. He's not a conservative. I don't know what you'd call him. He's an environmentalist. And we conservatives need to champion our environment, because we do want to. We do want to champion women's rights, and we don't want our daughters and wives, raped. Or do we support racism? No, we don't. Of course we don't. And we need to define ourselves.
Right.
Now, Wendell Berry has written in some very well thought out essays why it is that it is not the government's role to protect the environment. In fact, I just wrote about this. I have an article coming out in the next few days in True North Reports about this, that even though we might want the idea of government, and this is not a conservative saying, this isn't a libertarian, I don't think it's kind of a libertarian argument, even though it might be desirable, there might be a whole new host of negative things that happen if we gave government the power to decide to regulate the environment for our protection, because special interests would get involved, just like they do in farming, just like they do in everything. Who trusts the government? Who trusts the government to give it all these power? That's what really divides Americans right now. Those who do trust government with its track record, it can't even fund the pensions in Vermont, but you want to give it the entire environment. And what Wendell Berry says, here's my authority, they can't do it. The way you conserve land is through the stewardship of farmers on a small scale, intergenerationally. They know their land. They know its best productive use. No, you don't sequester carbon by turning the entire state of Vermont back into trees. Where do you think your food comes from?
We have trees. We have a low carbon footprint.
Once again, this is creating an industry so that people out in California can pay for the indulgence to pollute and then buy a carbon sequestered tree credit from Vermont. Did it reduce the amount of production of pollution or even carbon? No. It just shifted money around. It is an indulgence. So, and I'm really wondering when the social justice warriors who are so upset about race and gender identification and sexual orientation and the environment are going to add molested children and pedophilia to their list of those that they will champion their rights for, because that's a real scourge in real numbers. It's happening right now, not in the Civil War era.
Right.
And they're blind to it. Now, I seem to have digressed there, but I haven't. Because what I'm saying is government isn't even doing what it should be doing with its police powers. It is not helping us in the opioid crisis. It is not helping us with our economy. It is, and now it's going to take over the environment. Wendell Berry says, if you want to help the environment, don't let government take it over. That would be the best answer to that proposition. But as far as what they're going to do with it, like the Global Warming Solutions Act, it becomes a carte blanche to give unlimited unspoken powers to the government, a total delegation of power. It is an illusion after these things if we think we're a republic or a democracy anymore.
Well, you're right on, John. The TCI, Transportation
Climate
Initiative and Global Warming Solutions Act, to me, are government control, and they're high costs for the people, and their control of the people.
Well, and they milk it. So, for instance, as the Tax Structure Commission just came out with recently with their proposal, they want to tax groceries. And they literally say in their proposal that we think taxing groceries would be the best way to protect poor people from taxes on groceries. Okay? Hear that. They say that over and over again. I give you the quotes. I'm a tax attorney. This, from a tax policy perspective, is an embarrassment. Caught with your hand in the cookie jar. What they say is this. Right now, we're foregoing about $130 million a year in tax revenue that we could collect if we taxed everybody on their 6% or whatever on groceries. And only about $40 million of that's going to poor people. About $80 million of that's going to rich people. And that's a tax expenditure. That's what they call that. That's them spending their money. No. We need to collect the whole 140, and then we'll skim off 15% for our administrative costs, and then we'll stop letting those rich people get away with not paying their share, and then we'll send some coupons back to the poor people. But every study we've looked at shows that no state has been able to do that efficiently, and that those credit programs don't work. And this tax commission never once says how they're going to do it. Oh, we'll just give it back. Once again, big, stellar plans without looking at the costs at all. And this is why government is bankrupting us. And Vermont is at the forefront. We're the first in the country on everything. We're going to be the first to go bankrupt. We have some of the worst fiscal situations with our pensions, our healthcare situation, our welfare costs, and we're destroying our businesses. But it's a great place to live.
Well, you know what I always say? On the surface, Vermont is gorgeous. But when you start digging, you get into trouble.
Well, I'm digging.
Well, I'm digging too.
Let's sound off together. How are we
Okay.
doing for time, by the way?
We have a little over 5 minutes.
Woohoo! We can cover.
Time flies when you're having
solve
fun.
all the world's problems now. What would you like to
Oh, let's see.
focus on as we wrap
I
up?
had a couple of other things. My big list here, things to
It is a
talk.
big list. I'm grateful to you. I can see you worked hard. It's intimidating, but it's humbling.
I like the fact that there was a bill introduced, I believe one of the legislators from Rutland perhaps, introduced a school choice bill. And I'm all in favor of that because it provides, when you have the choice of school to send your child to, that creates competition. And competition helps to lower cost and, I hope, and improve quality of the education because there's competition. And so I really would like to see that. At least families have a choice to select the school that best meets the needs of their children. But the government in Vermont has to stop overspending, overtaxing, over-controlling, and healthcare, education, transportation, fuels, land, you name it.
Oh, you just did.
Yes.
You named it all.
And I've had it.
Well, you know, the school one, if that's all right, I would point out a couple of things about that.
Please do.
It's unsustainable. A lot of what I talk about in agriculture and what Wendell Berry talks about and what many of us are studying is how do we long-term sustain our environment and our food supply locally and sustain our economy. Well, if you wanted to make a comparison analysis, the school system is not sustainable. And we've lost about 25% of our students in the last 25 years. We haven't lost a single superintendent. We have 53 superintendents making about $153,000 a year on average, I believe. And that's more than neighboring states as a percentage of our income.
What are we getting for the investment?
Well, you should call the superintendents and ask them that. But what
I just met with one.
now, and I'm actually not out to bash them
was
because they
great.
can be well-intentioned. I'm not a big fan of Act 46. I am completely humbled by this problem. I don't sit here telling Vermonters that I have a solution. Moreover, though, I will throw something else out. Having seen the questionnaire from the National Education Association last year when I was on my campaign, I was pretty shocked. Have a look at what they're teaching about reteaching history and how horrible America is, and it's a socialist agenda.
Oh yeah, globalism.
No, really, and so I answered the questionnaire and I said, look, I'm all about number 13. If you want your pensions funded, then I will try to deliver on that, and I will tell you how. And I have a lot of plans how to do that. As far as everything else you want to do, it's just a lot of it's
There's
crazy.
a big but there. I think that's basically what you were trying to say. If you want this done and that done,
Yeah.
but we have to have.
You can't have it both ways, and
Nope.
and I wasn't willing to say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. It is literally an indoctrination education. I've written articles about that. Active shooter drills terrify children. Studies show that an active shooter drill can traumatize a child as much as an active shooting would. Would we do an active rape drill? Would we terrorize our children that the world is going to end in 10 years? Why go to college? Why even study? Why not go home and just eat popcorn and be totally stressed out and anxious and,
be
depressed?
dependent and
like they are.
depressed.
Well, and they are. And so what I would say is, why would any person put their child in this public education system. Now, how dare I say that when I'm trying to help repair it? But now
I
we
want
see.
to repair it too.
Well, and they've pushed now for transgender surgeries for children that are 12, 13, 14 years of age. And now some parents are going, who didn't care about the culture wars, are saying, I'm taking my kids out of that school. Well, we better darn well make you keep them there, because it's a bigger threat to the public education system the more they impose these things that are not appropriate for government to impose on children. Children should leave. Sorry.
Believe it or not, we're down to a little over 1 minute. Time flies.
Thanks for joining us tonight. And thanks for having me. You're always a joy.
Oh, gosh. Yes, I always thank the viewers for tuning in. Don't forget, I think it's next weekend.
Oh, the 27th, we have an event.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to tell people, VermontLiberty.net, go on the website, sign up for our newsletter, and sign up for to follow me, and you'll get the articles, and you can buy T-shirts and bumper stickers.
The Zoom meeting, are you talking about on the 27th?
No, I cut you off. The 27th is our meeting at the State House when we celebrate our monthly meeting. We have the 27th at noon. I stole your thunder.
Oh, that's
Tell your
okay.
event before we run out of
That's
time.
okay. You'll have to, State House, okay. Don't forget to set your clocks ahead, and we'll have more daylight, folks. And I pray that all of you find a purpose for your lives. If you don't feel like you have one now, lift yourself up, try to help someone else, and have a great week ahead. See you next week. Thank you, John.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thanks for having me.